Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MSDynamicsWorld.com. And on this episode, we catch up with Nicholas Hayduk, founder of Engineered Code, to learn more about what's coming next with Microsoft Dynamics 365 Portal, based on the recently released April 2019 release notes. There's some exciting updates like the removal of dependencies on first-party Dynamics app objects, and intriguing hints at the future, like a new way to display external data. Nick is a Portal and Adxstudio veteran, if you haven't caught any of his articles or presentations in the community before, and he recently wrote about the April 2019 release wave on his blog. All right. Hey, Nicholas Hayduk, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to put this conversation kind of framed around some of the writing you've already done around the April 2019 release notes, and specifically around Portal for plans in the April through October 2019 timeframe. You did a really nice job of breaking down sort of the things you, I guess, see as most important. And since I'm not a full-time Portals guy, but I can certainly appreciate the importance of them and maybe the growing importance of them to the business app stack, I thought it'd be great to just kind of get a little more input from you and talk through some of the things and maybe ask you a couple questions of things that aren't totally clear to me as a non-Portal professional. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Portals is something I'm pretty passionate about. It's what I spend most of the day thinking about. So I'd be happy to share whatever the little bits that I do know. I'm happy to share.
Excellent. Well, maybe we'll just start by jumping into some of the things that did catch your eye. And I think I would have, if I had to pick one, I guess this probably would have been the one as well, and that's the CDS Starter Portal. This is something new, and it's, as I understand it, really kind of in the spirit of making XRM, or making sort of the CDS separate and app building separate from the first-party Dynamics products.
Yeah. So in some ways it is something new, but in really in fact they had to kind of remove things in order to make this happen. So it's not any specific set of features other than the fact that they've gone through and they've removed some dependencies that were in kind of the core Portal product, some dependencies that were on some of the first-party apps. Kind of the one that we hear most about is that there was one of the core solutions depended on the case entity. So obviously that's not necessarily something you get with the kind of just the CDS. So what they've gone through is they've gone through and kind of removed those dependencies so that you can install a Portal in just kind of a plain CDS environment. So, I mean, all those dependencies were there for historical reasons and not because, I mean, there's certainly case functionality in some of the Portal templates, but the base Portal functionality shouldn't have any dependencies. They just happen to because of, legacy historical reasons. So this is something we've been waiting for a little while, or something we've been told has been coming for a little while. So we were certainly very excited to see that we should expect to see that as part of the April 19 release. So the fact that we can start leveraging the Portal on non-first-party apps is certainly great news.
What are some of the reasons that you are excited about it? What do you expect to be able to do differently now?
Well, it's really like so in our history, we've done a ton of what we consider to be XRM implementations that aren't necessarily leveraging sales or customer service. And so back in the day, we'd have to sell the full Dynamics licenses, and it just made it a more difficult sale when, right now you're looking at, over $100 a month for one of the first-party apps. If we bring that down into the P2 licensing and we allow people to have these XRM applications using Power App P2 plans and add a Portal onto that, it just opens up all of these places and just makes it an easier sell, just mostly from a cost perspective, that you can do these things that we could always do. And that's why I mentioned it. It's not like it's a new feature. It just allows us to leverage those P2, the Portal, when you're doing an implementation that's only leveraging the P2 licenses.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Sort of, it's almost an absence of, or it's almost a cleanup. The feature is sort of the re-architecting or the cleaning up of the code base to get rid of those dependencies and make it an easier, a cleaner implementation, an easier sell. Were there workarounds before that you had to go through to kind of avoid those historical dependencies?
No, not really. I mean, because the big thing is right now, because this is a software as a service, we're limited into we have to follow the Microsoft procedures to deploy one of these portals. And so if you spun up a CDS environment, you just simply didn't get the administration area where you could enable a portal. So there was just simply no options for that. And like I said, these dependencies on, say, the case entity, they weren't actually kind of functional. It just happened to be that the solutions had these historical dependencies, but if you ask probably most portal developers, they may not have even known that those dependencies existed. So it's going to open up a lot of doors on projects that we're starting to see more and more people trying to take advantage of that other licensing tier. And so whereas up until this is released, you just simply didn't have the option of putting a portal on there. Now we'll have that possibility.
Yeah, very interesting, and I suppose it goes hand in hand with the Power Apps story, with the Power Apps P2 license and the kind of solutions that I guess partners will be pitching around building Power Apps with CDS. So many of those, I imagine, have a pretty nice use case or a pretty clear use case for why a portal with that is maybe a logical enhancement to it or way to enrich it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if and I'm going to put on my prognostication hat here, and to me it seems like we need to rename these things to be power portals once this happens, because really once they become part of the base framework, they're a huge tool. Because really the big thing, and you keep hearing people ask Microsoft, is when am I going to be able to have people outside my organizations use Power Apps? Right now, you have to have your Active Directory login. You need to have like a company login to get into your Power App. And the answer to that could be, well, you don't. You do that through a portal. Because really that's one of the main audiences for a portal is your external audience. And so that could be the answer to that question. Well, you don't need a Power App for that. You have your portal for that. So.
All right, interesting. Well, let's move on and look at some of the other things that you've identified. Honestly, I saw the Portal Diagnostics tool. I wasn't sure what to really take from that. It sounds useful. Anything worth noting around that?
No, I mean, the thing that kind of just was funny to me when I saw that come out, I looked at that and thought, well, I remember them announcing that, but I honestly haven't played with that yet. So I'm like, hey, let me go see if I can find this Portal Diagnostics tool and download it, because I must have missed the news when it was released. And in fact, I found out that it hasn't been released. So even the initial version of it, the thing that they're announcing enhancements for, the original one still isn't publicly available yet. I expect that it'll be coming out soon, and of course that's still in line with the release cycle that they have, right? That was announced as part of the October release, and the October release really covers anything between October and March. So it's not that they missed a deadline or anything. It's just people think October release, everything will be out in October. Well, that just isn't the case. So this is just one of those features that was part of the October release. We haven't seen it yet, and I just found it, it's like, oh, they've announced these enhancements. I'm still eager to see the original tool. So it's kind of hard to comment on the enhancements when you don't know what the original feature set was. The enhancements that they've talked about sound interesting, and for those of you who don't know about what this tool does, the idea is that you can essentially kind of run this tool against your portal, and it will give you some hey, maybe you've got this thing misconfigured, or this might be some performance issues, kind of like they have the solution checker, those types of things. So think of it as kind of solution checker for Portal. What they've said in this latest release is that they're going to target specifically misconfigured site markers, entity permissions, and maybe something to do with the solution installation and update failure. So all three areas where it will be great to find out, if someone's having issues run the tool and get some feedback on maybe why their portal isn't performing as it should.
All right, sounds like a good thing to have. And yeah, it certainly speaks to the cycle or the rhythm in which the company is releasing these things periodically, and what these sort of release notes really mean on a 6-month basis. All right, well, let's move on. You noted Power BI embedded support. So this is the ability to share Power BI reports and dashboards with Portal users that don't have a Power BI account. And that's taking your description of it. So this is brand new, or this is maybe a step forward?
Yeah, and so I'll be the first to admit I am personally no Power BI expert, and certainly no Power BI licensing expert. So some of that was I tried to kind of I looked at the language that Microsoft presented. So as part of the October release, what we got was the Power BI integration with portals was released. My understanding is that Power BI embedded is another kind of product line, and my understanding is that that's a feature that lets you expose it to people who don't necessarily have the Power BI license, whereas the old technique, or sorry, I shouldn't even call it old because it's only been out for a few months here, but the first iteration relied on either you kind of sharing your portal, or sorry, your Power BI chart. You had to kind of create a share link, or you had to, it was tied to your Active Directory account. So I think they've just taken this one step further, and if you can use the Power BI embedded functionality, the portal now will support those that way of putting the charts on the portal.
It's an interesting well, capability, but also I'm wondering which way sort of experienced Power BI customers will go with this, because exposing Power BI reports, I think, it can be a challenge when you're talking about people who are not in the organization, but using portals is a challenge of its own, and so I'm curious whether experienced portals customers will embrace this or get more expertise on or invest in Power BI embedded as an offering, or whether experienced Power BI customers will say, "Hey, let's check out Portal, and let's start standing those up as a way to expose more analytics and reports to more people."
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Yeah, because I mean, certainly there are some people out there who specialize in the kind of the Power BI side of things. And there's a few people out there who are on kind of portals, so it'll be interesting to see who does this excite them more, or does this excite us more? That'd be interesting to find out.
All right. The next one, you wrote a lot about maintenance mode, and to me it seems like probably the shortest or least complicated of the enhancements that you took note of.
Yeah, so
am I wrong?
So the reason it was so long was because I gave the solution that we typically do because we haven't had maintenance mode in the past. And it's funny how these things come up and you hear about them once and then you hear about them 5 times in the next week, because I actually just responded. I was on the community forums the other day, and someone was asking about, hey, our environment is getting an upgrade, and probably because I know in the last couple of weeks here we get into the tail end of when people have been somewhat forced to get their version 9 upgrade. So I think there were probably a lot of upgrades happening over the last little while. So someone was asking, okay, my portal is obviously attached to my Dynamics instance. What happens when my Dynamics instance goes down for a couple hours during the upgrade? And unfortunately, the answer is your portal also is not going to be very happy during that time, because obviously the portal heavily relies on having its connection to Dynamics to show all the content. So, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, and that's what Microsoft is introducing, is that the portal is really just a web application that's sitting in Azure that happens to talk to Dynamics. What they're introducing is the ability to configure a page on there that has no dependencies on the CRM or on your Dynamics instance, so that in cases when your Dynamics instance is not available, you can display kind of just a static page, not pulling anything from Dynamics, and say, hey, our page is or our portal is undergoing some maintenance. What I wrote about in my blog post was about, okay, so you couldn't do that before. What we typically would recommend people do is take the DNS entry or point your domain at another website in that interim, and that other, so you can spin up an Azure web app, put a static maintenance page up there, and just kind of reroute the DNS. This solution is much nicer than that, because for those of you who are familiar with changing DNS, it can take a while to propagate, and it's kind of in general just a pain. So this is obviously a much simpler solution. But in the meantime, if you got something going on before this becomes available, updating the DNS, I feel, is a better solution than having your portal kind of go down essentially for the couple hours while your Dynamics instance is unavailable.
Yeah, certainly. If you're a sysadmin who doesn't consider that acceptable, to just have them go down together, it certainly makes sense.
It all kind of goes back to, and we find this over and over and over with portal implementations. Companies care a lot more about what their customers see than what what happens internally. So, okay, the CRM's down for a while, you get that the error message. Okay, whatever. But if their customers see that it's some ugly error message, that's unacceptable. So we need to fix that.
Yeah, it's bad luck. Great point. So let's move on here. This was the one that I was probably the least able to grasp. So maybe you can talk me through it about. And you actually described this one as the most intriguing of the coming enhancements that caught your eye, and that was what Microsoft describes as displaying external data in a portal. And where I got confused in reading, I think I frankly brushed past this one in the release notes when I've been looking at it, because I think maybe got confused as well. But the idea of client-side APIs, portal APIs for accessing different systems, whether it's like a Dynamics app as a third party, or just any other third party app. Microsoft has plans there, but what's your best understanding right now?
Yeah, and so this was the one where it was the description didn't seem to necessarily match the title, and that's what kind of led me to be a bit confused, because I've got no other knowledge other than what I've been able to read in the release notes. So the title says displaying external data in a portal, but then they talk about in the actual 2 or 3 sentence description saying what they're going to do is offer a way for the portal to provide tokens that you can use in a third-party service to basically validate the credentials of the user who's making these calls. So one of the limitations that we have with this new version of portals as compared to the old Adxstudio days is our inability to put custom server-side .NET code in the website. So we're proponents of a technique, and this is something that many portal developers have kind of have started doing, is what's called a companion app. So you take you essentially spin up a web service on a completely separate server, one that you maintain yourself. You can put your own custom code, and then on the portal itself, you use JavaScript to call this extra service. So those are companion apps. That was coined by Colin Vermander, who's an MVP and at Adxstudio, and obviously knows pretty much all there is to know about portals. So he kind of coined the term companion app, and see again the idea of this other server sitting there, and then we can interact using JavaScript with this other server. But the big challenge with that is that because it's a different server, it's a different domain, there was no straightforward way of sharing the fact that I'm logged into the portal doesn't mean I'm logged into this other web service. So we had to figure out a way to say, okay, I'm going to make a call to this other web service, but I need to validate that I'm this particular contact record, because everything in the portal ties back to, okay, who's the contact who's logged in? So we need a way of determining who's logged in. And because of the way that authentication works on the portal, there was really no kind of straightforward way of sharing that. Now, there's been a number of ways that have been devised to do that, but they've all been complicated, or maybe more complicated than they need to be, or maybe they relied on choosing a specific way of authenticating into the portal. What it sounds like to me is this is going to give us a standard way of doing that. So a standard way of another application to authenticate the contact in the same way that the portal is doing it. So someone logs into the portal, we can also somehow share that authentication with another service. And that is by the portal issuing a token that these other services will trust and say, okay, you said you have this token, I know you are contact A, B, and C. The part that I find confusing is that technique could be used not only to display external data in a portal. So not only could you call your web service and use it to pull data from any sort of external system, you can always also use that to interact with Dynamics itself. And you can also use it to not only display data, read data, but to update data. If you have a web service there, you have complete control over whether you support updates or reads or deletes or whatever it is that you want to do. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe there was a business case for allowing that external display of external data, and so that's kind of where the title came from, and their implementation maybe opened it up for even more capabilities. Again, I'm trying to read between the lines here of what was in the documentation or in the release notes, but my sense is that they're allowing us to share the authentication that you get with the portal with other services so that we can have essentially this seamless single sign-on experience with these services we're kind of using behind the scenes.
So might a case for that be, say, Business Central, and putting a portal up in front of that, where it has some basic CRM contact capabilities, I think, and certainly it has its own web API.
Yep.
Might that be a third-party system, if you will, that a portal would be a great place to connect with easily?
Exactly, yeah. And so we've used the same technique to expose SharePoint. Now, the SharePoint integration is now a feature of Portal, but before that came available, that was that was a highly requested option, was the ability to expose SharePoint on there. So before it became an out-of-the-box feature, we used to do that with a companion app. And so, yeah, no, certainly Business Central or any of the any of the AX or finance and operations or anything with an API. You can expose through the portal using the companion app technique. It sounds like they're just giving us an easier way to do the authentication, which honestly was one of the more kind of painful parts or one of the more limiting parts of the companion app architecture.
Does this approach maybe go hand in hand or sit side by side with the option of getting back to maybe the first thing we talked about, which was a cleaner CDS environment where you're seeing other things in the release notes, like plans to really strengthen, let's say, the finance and operations ability to post data to a common data model, which I guess would then sort of be something you could build off of in a portal. So if more applications are really pushing data into a CDS environment, maybe that's sort of a parallel track of getting access to more data in portals.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if the data is getting pushed into your CDS environment, that makes it easy, because then it's no longer external system. Any data that appears in your CDS environment, which is your Dynamics environment, you can expose very simply through the portal. It would be more of a case of you have data that maybe, at this point, we've still got the kind of the difference between the CDS and some of the ERP platforms. So until that happens, you have the ability to, rather than trying to sync data into Dynamics, you can just pull it directly, as opposed to, having to sync it into Dynamics and using up space and worrying about, is it still accurate, and all the fun parts that come with trying to synchronize data. You can maybe avoid them. If your only use case is we need to display this in a portal, this is certainly an approach that you need to consider.
So, all right, cool. Anything else from the, since we're talking about the release notes, anything else from them that you saw that was particularly interesting or new and fun, or are you really mostly just trying to digest all this portal stuff?
Yeah, I honestly haven't had a chance to kind of dive too much into any of the other aspects of it. I know that there were some comments about I think it was within marketing where there was kind of the talk about, integrating with content management systems, but it was unrelated to Portal, so there were some questions about that. Yeah, otherwise my focus so far on the release notes, I think it was 320 some pages or whatever. So far my focus was on, okay, what does this mean for portals? And so far I don't see anything major in there. But I see a few things that are, obviously the CDS thing is things that make me happy, and things that make me think that this is still a long-term play for Microsoft. This doesn't look like something that's gonna, disappear after, a few years after the acquisition.
Yeah, I'm getting the sense that these release notes sort of are a bit of a signal to anyone reading them of what their own most interesting element of Microsoft technology is. I've heard, I think I saw just in passing a blog post that expressed some disappointment on the Business Central side that there wasn't sort of a deeper, more exciting list of enhancements coming with Business Central, just for example. And
I think I saw that same post, and I thought was quite interesting that they would come out and just be like, yeah, we're not getting the love, is kind of what the impression I got.
Yeah, right. People want to see progress, and I'm sure it ebbs and flows with every 6-month release. But certainly, I think that's a key part of what these release note documents, which is the second one or maybe the third one that Microsoft has produced. But I think that's sort of what these are becoming, and that's valuable. I mean, it keeps people pretty engaged to see where their product is going.
Yeah, no, I love the kind of the release cadence that we have now, and we know that next October that things will come out, and especially with portals, which has kind of always been not as mainstream as some of the other things. It was often difficult to find, okay, what is coming.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't attend the right conference, you didn't find out these things, and now it's like, okay, everyone, here's the document. You can't say we didn't warn you. So, and obviously lots of
there's a few corners
notice, and
Yeah, it's certainly one. I agree. I mean, I think it's great news for Portal. I think this seems to me anyway to be a sign that it has at least some attention and its potential is still very high, which is pretty cool. And there's other areas in the whole application sort of suite that seem that way. Just thinking out loud, on the AX side, the finance operation side, there's certainly some areas like seeing plans for lifecycle services. I think is like a critical one for that group to really know sort of what some of the management tools are going to be coming up that are maybe harder to track. And Portal sort of fit that way. I felt like it got a little harder to track where it was going, maybe in the last couple of years, and so this does bring more sunlight to it. Cool. Definitely. Well, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time here. Really appreciate it. We'll have to do it again. Well, maybe next time there's a new release notes coming out, or if not before.
Talk to you in 6 months. Yeah.
Very good. This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to Nicholas Hayduk for joining me today. If you have any feedback or want to get in touch, reach out by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.